Rightio, it's Naeem. Now, let's just get this out of the way. I am doing Tina Kane by Imaginary Dad. Now, what I meant by let's get this out of the way is last week or the week before, I was celebrating the Carabao Cup win, hence the Man United hat. This week, or rather yesterday, was absolute shambles. Shambles. We lost, United lost 7-0 to our arch rivals, our nemesis, Liverpool. It's shocking. But regardless, I decided to pick Tina Kane, which is a slightly modern poem and poet. And the only thing I know about her is that she did study in New York City, and she has written a couple, I believe, French poems and books as well. And because she's quite new, there's not much I can read online, so I'd have to use my critical thinking skills, and also just it doesn't always have to be analytical. I feel sometimes there's a line in George Orwell 1984 that I've always remembered, which was something along the lines of, it's not so much he or she wanted to be understood so much as wanted to be listened to. Or I may have fumbled, ironically. Something like that, like to be felt, to be understood. So sometimes poems aren't necessarily meant to be understood. They're meant to be felt. It depends. I mean, yeah. Alright, I'll see you on the other side. Imaginary Dad by Tina Kane. Was so imaginary he ceased to exist. He wasn't sleeping in a treehouse or stalking the woods in fatigues, cheeks smeared green with camouflage grease, a knife between his teeth like I had envisioned him. He was just a married guy living in a small town near a dozen of my made-up cousins, kin so distant they didn't even know to miss me all their lives. I'd picture them fumbling in their pockets through loose change, patting their pants in search of something left behind all the time, never knowing what it was or what it was like to eat Twizzlers while watching Apocalypse Now in a darkened theatre on Bleecker Street, to think each time a soldier appeared on screen, now there's a dad, if ever I saw one, because of course they'd seen one. He was nothing like that, and he belonged to me. Honestly, sometimes I do kind of regret picking the more modern ones, because I have to use sort of on-the-go analysis. But so far, my take, like the Imaginary Dad, reading through the poem, it obviously gives the vibe of this sort of soldier dad, and who's very distant from their kids. Right at the very beginning, stalking in the woods, cheeks smeared green, camouflage grease. So I think it might be the reverse or inverse, or it might be that she's thinking of her dad as this guy, but really her dad is just, an ordinary dad. But we sort of hype up this masculine vision of what fatherhood and manhood is. And some of the shows, like Apocalypse Now, I don't know what that was, but I just did a quick search. It's, classic war film, and again, reinforces that idea of what kind of dad, sort of soldier, like. And, there is this sort of, when fathers, there is this sort of, you want to protect your children. Yeah. Interestingly to note, it's also the layout of the poem is quite spaced out and scattered. Now it's obviously structured that way on purpose, but I think it also illustrates the fragmentary thoughts of the poet, because that's how imaginations work. You know, when you use your imagination, you're not necessarily thinking in a coherent thesis. You're sort of thinking in fragmentary thoughts, fragmentary sentences. Sentences, if you put it in a transcript, looks like this, but obviously this poem is far more intricate. Yeah, it's hard to take, like, I really want to read what other people think of this. It's just, again, if I do modern poems, you're not going to get a lot of reactions or articles on it, so I just really do have to require my own sort of imagination, made up cousins and distance. So maybe this whole imaginary dad is not just imaginary dad, but imaginary world in which that's how you see one person, but in relation to other people as well. Yeah, it's really difficult to pick this poem in isolation because, of course, I think the poem comes from a book or an issue from the poet in a obviously larger anthology and collection. I just wish I don't take poems out of context because I could be missing the entire point. And that's sometimes how, for example, like a song is made in an album. There are some songs that are just completely outstanding and they can exist outside of an album. But sometimes that song is there for the album on purpose and it only makes sense in relation to everything else. And in fact, some albums actually put it in order. Like there's an intro, track 1, track 2, and there's a pattern. There's a pattern there. Sometimes it's just no pattern, but so maybe I'm missing something here, but this is probably the first poem that I genuinely am a bit more bewildered about, and it does require a bit more prying. There is italics, apocalypse now, and then the emphasis on now there's a dad if ever I saw one. I don't know what to make of that statement. Because of course they'd seen one, he was nothing like that and he belonged to me. Who's they? The cousins? That's why I just feel like this requires far more I really do not regret it, but I do sort of pick the traditional ones more because I can actually learn the historical context. This is not even trying to read the biography. It's a very short thing. I will do more research on it, hopefully, and I'm not going to forego and completely abandon modern poems, but I think it's just not as easy to quite understand because, of course, as with most poems, the narrator or character doesn't have to be the poet herself or himself. But, I mean, most of the time it is. You're speaking from a different experience or a different lens, but there is you at the end of it. Yeah. See you next week where hopefully... I have a few lined up. I'm going to mix and match, but yeah. Peace.